That's based on EMIS data that we've submitted to ODE. That number will fluctuate back and forth throughout the entire year, and then we have growth going forward each year. So when we talked about what's driving the revenue, this page is driving the revenue also. The next slide is our expenditures per pupil. So you can see in 24 is 13,301, and then we continue to see that increase. Different schools of thought on expenditure per pupil. If you can get 5 stars and spend $10,000 as a student, I think you're efficient in what you're doing and you're achieving what ODE says you need to achieve. If you're spending $20,000 per student and you got 1.5 stars, what does that mean? Are they not doing what they're supposed to be doing? So I don't necessarily look at this number and say this has got to be higher, because I don't believe that philosophy. I think we can do things efficiently and still achieve what the measures are that are out there for us.
Well, what's the $1,200 bump for this year? Staffing?
Yeah, it's our cost. Our costs have gone up, and then...
Which is primarily staffing?
Yes, correct. Next slide kind of breaks it down. This is interesting per day. So it costs us $81 a day to educate every student in the district. On the right-hand side kind of breaks down as who is providing those resources. So 37% of your cost, or that $81, is being provided by your resident property owners. That's your class 1 property value at your effective rate plus your income tax. And the balance is provided by your businesses and state and federal funding. So 37% local and 63% other. Next graph kind of summarizes some of the things we mentioned earlier. It just gives you a little prettier picture, if you will, comparing the base. What is the base? The base was FY25 in the May forecast. So since then, we've increased revenue by $8.8 million. We've talked about that. The lion's share is the DPIA. Your income tax is up a little bit compared, and then your small property tax. Expenditures are up $4.5 million. That's the additional staffing that we've added, the transportation cost increases that we mentioned, the preschool MOU that when we approved that the estimate was lower than what they provided to us in July. So those are the pieces that are driving the change when you look back at May of 24's forecast for FY25. Final slide here, this is DPIA and no DPIA. The green line represents your cash balance if DPIA continues going forward. I have nothing to hang my hat on that says DPIA is going away, other than there's a lot of discussion happening around school districts whose DPIA may have dropped going into FY25, and they didn't change at all. They changed because we changed. We went to CEP, and all of our students are now economically disadvantaged. I think it's safe to say that everybody in this room can agree that we don't have 12,000 students that would be economically disadvantaged if we weren't in CEP. Because that number last year was about 4,700 students. So how will the legislature look at this? What's ODE's role in having that conversation with the legislature? Does that impact us? If it goes away and it goes back to pre-FY25 funding, $16 million in 2 years is gone. So we end 25 with $20 million bucks. So we have $4 million at the end of 27.
So, your opinion on where the legislature will stand on this is far rosier than mine. I have a little bit more cynical opinion about what our friends downtown may or may not do, since healthier school districts like ours are doing this program. Does that money flow from the Fed to the state to us, or just from the state to us?
It's from the state.
Okay,
it's
it's
a
all
separate.
funding?
Yeah, it's a separate part of the state's operating budget. It's general fund, but there's a different different revenue source the CEP money we get for food service comes from the Fed.
Yeah.
Those are two separate individual
Okay.
discussions.
So the current contract we have is a agreement is a 5-year, for DPIA.
For the CEP program, it's a 4-year. This year plus 3 more.
Which is 25, 26, 27, 28. But DPIA is tied to that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're assuming that actually the program and the funding will actually go on another year?
Correct. I have it, the life of this forecast through FY29.
Right, okay, so because, you're ending on kind of a downer note with this slide, just so you know.
Well, I want the board to be aware of what's potentially out there. I hope it's the green line, absolutely.
I agree, I just,
Dollar for dollar over the last 3 years, the state has spent less on DPIA each year. So does that play into, can we afford it? Well, you're spending less than you did last year.
And jacking up their rainy day fund, right?
Yeah, and you're spending less than you did the year before. So there's that argument that says this program is not breaking the state because actual dollars are spending less because of the way the formula works.
Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any other comments, questions for Mr. Walsh?
Yes. So again, this 5-year forecast does not have infused in it costs affiliated with any of the long-term conversations that we're currently having.
It does not.
And does it include staffing increases, salary increases for staff?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It has increases either through the current CBAs or an estimated amount.
Okay,
Yes.
going forward if they're not the CBAs?
Right.
Okay, and okay, great.
Any other comments, questions? Having a motion and a second, Mr. Walsh, can you call the roll, please?
Roll call, Mr. Postage.
Yes.
Henson.
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes, excellent presentation, thanks.
Thank you. Item number 3 is just a link to the previously approved donations throughout the fiscal year. So that's all I have unless there are any other questions.
No, sir, thank you. Next is section D, consent agenda. Dr. Briggs, do you want to walk us through those items?
I will. Thank you, President Lopez and board members. Under consent agenda items, the first one is administrative personnel. We're asking you to accept the resignation of the individual as listed, and you'll see her name later on in the agenda for another position. That is the administrative personnel section. Is there any questions from board members? Number 2 is certificated licensed personnel. We do have OST intervention tutor coordinators on the agenda for both high schools this evening. We have Pathway to Success program teachers as listed. Substitute teachers, this is a licensure expansion for the 3-year pre-service teacher permit. And then we have substitute teachers for the licensure expansion to non-bachelors substitute license as submitted. And then we just have on the board agenda as well, we have regular substitute teachers for this school year. And again, I agree with you, Kathy, good job to our HR department for getting this many substitutes ready to go. That is the certificated licensed personnel section. Is there any questions from board members? Hearing none. Number 3 is support personnel. We do have asking the board to accept a letter of resignation from 4 individuals on the board agenda this evening. And I do want to point out that 2 of them are retirements. Thanks to Beth for getting me this information, as always. Suzanne Rogers at Pick Elementary, the head custodian, has been with the district since March of 2001, nearly 24 years. We wish her nothing but the best. And then Barbara Weaver, who works out of the district office, administrative secretary for custodial maintenance. She's been with the district since August of 2004 for almost 20 years. So good luck to both of those ladies in their retirement. We have a leave of absence on the agenda this evening. We're asking the board to approve as submitted. Support personnel recommendations, there's replacements. We're asking the board to accept them as submitted, again, pending all employment materials and background reports. And then substitute support service recommendations, as usual, we're asking the board to approve them, and you'll see the positions and the names as listed. Is there any questions about support personnel? Hearing none, number 4 is personnel supplemental contracts and stipends. Again, we're asking, there is one supplemental, we're asking the board to rescind the contract as listed. And then we have a supplemental contract and stipend recommendations, and you can see with the winter sports coming up, we have quite a few on the agenda this evening. And then stipends, we have one for the person in the position as listed. And then facility event supervisor for rentals, we have a person that is, we're recommending the board to approve at a $25 per hour rate. And then volunteer coaches and advisors, we're asking the board to approve them. That aligns with our policy 3120.09 and also the 4120.09. And that is the supplemental contracts and stipends section. Is there any questions from board members? Hearing none. Number 5 is budget and purpose statements. We're asking the board to accept the budget and purpose statements as submitted. Is there any questions about the budget and purpose statements? We're good. Board members, that is the consent agenda items for this evening.
Thank you, sir. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, Mr. Walsh, can you call the roll, please?
Roll call, Mrs. Niekamp,
Yes.
Mr. Henson,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski,
Yes.
Mr. Postage.
Yes.
That brings us to section E, discussion action items. Number 1 is board policy revisions for the second read. We have it looks like 10. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I apologize, I should have brought this up 2 weeks ago, but regarding policy 7250, the naming rights policy, that's a brand new policy, is that correct? I would like to add wording that says the board shall approve names. You can gussy those words up if, however you want. I just feel that I believe that's implied by the language in the policy, but I feel this way for future boards. I don't think the language is strong enough for future boards. And I just don't want to find the district in a position where the board doesn't give its official approval of a name.
Kathy, do you want to approve that the way it's written tonight, or would you rather have that pulled and then brought back at the next meeting? How would you?
Well, I prefer to just have it pulled, if my peers agree with me, just have it pulled and wordsmithed a little bit and then bring it back. And I mean no disrespect to, the policy is fine. I just would like a little stronger language put in place, if
Okay.
that's okay.
And I'm just, I mean.
I don't even know where it would go, but
Okay.
maybe you I was talking to Heather today, well,
Okay.
our phones were talking, and I just want something a little stronger, and I don't care where it's put.
So I guess I'm just curious as to what that might look like, because it says the Board of Education has the ultimate responsibility for naming.
Yeah, see, that word responsibility is where I get a little wiggy.
Gives you the right.
Are you okay if we just amend that? The ultimate responsibility for naming via formal resolution, just insert that and approve it?
That's fine, yeah,
Well,
I just want,
It is ultimately up.
I know, but that could be like a handshake or a phone call, or, I
Well,
mean,
okay.
sorry, I'm trying,
No,
I'm
no,
not
no,
trying
no,
to
I-
be picky.
I mean, but the next thing, the next section down says, in doing so, the board shall enter into a written agreement. I mean, so
So
that,
do you think that's,
I mean, to me,
Stronger?
shall is mandatory.
Right, I agree.
So if the board doesn't enter into a formal written agreement with somebody, it's not happening. I mean, that's the way I read it. I mean, because the shall
Yeah,
kind of
you're
puts
right.
the clamps down on, it's not a may.
Yeah,
So if there's anything that's to be named,
so you.
to
okay.
me, I mean, to me, I think I think it accomplishes what you're saying, because the words are mandatory in the shall.
Yeah, the only thing I caught from Kathy was the part that I said, were you wanting it to be clear in the one sentence that it has to be a formal resolution? I mean, all of
Or
our-
approval.
Yeah, all of
Yeah.
our stuff is via an open meeting of the board. but-
Right.
It had to be in there, yes.
Okay, I can live with that
Okay. You sure?
for now, but you know me.
I mean, it can always be brought back.
Yeah,
to,
right.
To do something.
And it
So-
doesn't happen a lot, but, okay, okay,
Okay.
So we'll leave it as it is right now?
yeah.
Okay.
Kathy's off the ledge, we're good.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, all right.
All right.
So I think we do have a motion and a second, so Mr. Walsh, can you call the roll, please?
Roll call, Mr. Henson.
Yes.
Mr. Postage.
Yes.
Mrs. Neecamp.
Yes,
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes,
Okay. Number 2, special education contracts. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
second,
Any discussion? Mr. Walsh, can you call the roll, please?
Roll call, Mr. Postage.
Yes.
Mrs. Neecamp.
yes,
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
yes,
Mr. Henson.
Yes.
Number 3 is a motion to approve the interim superintendent contract for Mr. Scott Hunt. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
second,
Any discussion?
If I could just comment, Dr. Hunt is with us this evening. Welcome. I know he comes to us with at least 5 years' experience working in Cardington, was it Cardington? Cardinal schools, and most recently working with the Ohio Department of Education workforce in their field, so as a deputy chief, so congratulations and welcome aboard.
only one comment.
Sure.
I think for the 4 people that are probably watching, to just explain that an.
I recruited a fifth.
You did a fifth, okay, 5 maybe that's watching tonight. But just to be clear that an interim, we're required to have a person of record with a superintendent's license. And an interim is someone who would act in that role until we find a permanent person. So in case we, just to avoid the 4 or 5 phone calls we'll get tomorrow to say, oh, so that's the new Chris, it's the new temporary Chris. But,
Understood.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, hearing none, Mr. Walsh, can you call the roll, please?
Roll call, Mr. Henson.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes,
Mrs. Neecamp.
Yes,
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mr. Postage.
Yes.
Congratulations, sir.
Yep.
Welcome aboard. And I know I texted with Mr. Hunt a little bit earlier, and I think he would like to say a few words. So if you want to just come up so we get you on mic and introduce yourself, and floor is yours.
Thank you. I won't take too long. I know board meeting evenings, typically you don't want to be here all night. So, but I do want to say thank you to the board. I really appreciate you placing your confidence in me to lead through the transition. And yes, it's an interim role, so I want to be clear that I also understand that it's an interim role. We'll see Dr. Briggs to retirement, and then we'll transition into your chosen superintendent here in the future. But I fully intend to work closely and collaboratively with the board to make sure we fulfill your wishes and needs moving the district forward, as well as with our students here, which will remain the primary focus from my perspective, working closely with the leadership team, teachers, students, families, and school community. So really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to starting. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, sir. Next, we have section G, information only. Number 1 is a Power Foundation grant, and I'm going to say this is Mr. Biacco.
Biacco.
Hopefully I said that correctly. It sounds very impressive.
He's purchased rocket
He's
supplies.
purchasing rocket supplies, 3D printers, and a muse machine. I hope that has something to do with the band. It probably doesn't.
Or the rockets.
Or the rockets. And it sounds very impressive, and I'm sure it'll go a long way to help all of our students that are involved in down there at Sycamore Creek and second grade classes with him. Sounds very awesome. Next is trips. The Central Varsity Wrestling Team is going to beautiful Painesville, Riverside High School, December 13th and 14th. I think that's up north, I think. And I'm sure in December it's even more beautiful than normal. And here's one, the girls basketball team, varsity basketball team for Central is going to Tampa.
I think I can accompany Dr. Hedgepath or Dr. Hedgepath's husband on that.
Yes, that sounds like
Smarter boys.
that sounds like a good trip. So the wrestlers may want to look into tournaments if those are available. Let's see, number 3, graduate program studies. We have a second grade teacher. Second grade teachers are excelling this
That's right.
meeting, so very
The others
good.
need to pay attention.
They are pursuing a master's degree in curriculum and instruction, so we wish them the best for that. Next is Plan for Progress. Dr. Briggs, do you have anything?
Just briefly, Board, I want to thank John for his presentation tonight. Obviously, lean and efficient operations is part of our pillars, and it's important that, you know, the 5-year forecast is a big part of that. So thanks for your presentation. Well done. We shared it with the cabinet this morning. And yeah, I think it's something that's obviously a work in progress when you're a district our size and constantly changing enrollment and staffing. And but we appreciate the work that went into that, and our leadership team, you know, we'll obviously use that forecast moving forward. So thanks.
Let's see.
And on that note, we're having a presentation on staffing next week or
Summer night.
I'd like to meet in a week if that's okay. In 2 weeks.
Let's see. Next is section H, comments and questions. Public comments and questions. Unfortunately for the 5 people watching, we cannot take your comments over YouTube. But if there's anybody in the room that wants to jump up and address us. Seeing no one. Board comments, questions.
Just one?
Yeah.
Maybe Kathy too. I appreciate that we were invited into the schools for Teacher for a Day. I think Kathy also participated that day. I was fortunate to spend a lot of time in some of our special needs classrooms over at Tollgate. Made lots of new little friends and big friends look alike. But just wanted to say thank you to Tollgate and thank you to our teachers for inviting us in.
Great, thank you.
Perfect. Anything else? No? All right, well, with that, looking for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
Moved. Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Walsh, can you call roll, please?
We'll call Mr. Henson.
Yes.
Mr. Postage.
Yes.
Mrs. Niekamp.
Yes?
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mrs. Olszewski.
Yes.